today for during our chapter meeting and during our professional development section for the chapter meeting. So this is about self-reflective computer science teachers, and we have the honor of having Vicky from California here, one of the authors and one of the people working on this PD, or this professional development in a box for self-reflective computer science teachers. So we're going to talk about reflective computer science teachers today at today's chapter meeting. So I'm going to give it over to Vicky. And I'll try to show her slides now.
She's ready.
So would it be possible for me to share the screen, just because I'm going to want to go back and forth between a couple things?
I'll exit, and then Pam, can you make Vicky the co-host?
Or just give me permission to share?
Sure. Yeah.
I think I have it. So
there you go.
All right.
Thank you, Vicky.
All right. So yes. So as Edge said, yeah, I'm from California, and I am one of the writers of the CS Teacher Standards. We're going to start with a little history of where the standards came from, why they are organized the way they are, so you kind of have that as a background. But a little history about me. I'm kind of a standards nerd. The reason I found CSTA was because of the standards. When I first became a computer science teacher, I actually was hired as a tech teacher, and the classes were mostly watch your kids type for 45 minutes. And I've personally found that really boring. And I had been a software developer before I became a teacher. And so I was like, what could kids do with computer science? So this was back in 2011. And so I was searching online for, okay, what should kids be able to do with this? And that's when I found Scratch, and I found the Computer Science Teachers Association and the 2011 standards. And so that's how I started my program at my school, was based on these standards. And then I was asked to work on the student standards, the CSTA student standards. Now, the Philippines doesn't have its own student standards, right? So are you kind of basing things on the CSTA standards then, or? Okay, because that's what I did at my school before California had its own standards, which actually are based and very, very similar to the CSTA standards anyway. So I'm kind of this standards person. I worked on the student standards for the elementary, and then have been working on the teacher standards. So we're going to talk a little bit about how those all got developed. Back in like 2016, 2017, ACM, which is the Association of Computing Machinery, who originally started CSTA, and Code.org and CSTA and other organizations, Cyber Innovation Center, National Math and Sciences Initiative, all got together to come up with basically a framework for computer science education in the United States. And what they ended up coming up with was 5 concepts and 7 practices to cover the breadth of what we should teach in K-12. And then from those concepts and practices, CSTA and others, a lot of other states and other organizations have developed standards for K-12 students based on the framework. Okay, so the framework, if you click, let me give you a link to the slides here really quick. you can open them yourself. And if you click on this link, it'll take you actually to the framework if you want to explore it in more depth. We're going to point out a couple things in this slideshow, but it's got some great information on how to implement it if you're interested in creating your own standards or things along that line. It's got some great information if you are in early childhood education, some great information on that, and then some additional resources. It's got a pretty good glossary of terms and things like that. But so the 5 concepts are these: computing systems, networks and the internet, data and analysis, algorithms and programming, and impacts of computing. And they were created this way to kind of illuminate these big ideas. They aren't meant to be like not crossing in any way. They will often cross. Like as you're teaching data and analysis, you probably are talking impacts, right? Because the collection of data that happens on all of us definitely impacts us. So there's a lot of things that will cross, but the core concepts are the things that kids should know, okay, about computer science. So they're big ideas and they overlap one another, okay? And that's just how they're divided up. If you look at the standards, you'll see they're divided similarly. And within each of the concepts, then there are sub-concepts within those as well. And then there's 7 core practices. This is what kids should be able to do with computer science. Okay, so they should be able to foster an inclusive computing culture. They should be able to create artifacts, collaborate, test and refine, recognize and define computational problems, communicate about what they're doing, and develop and use abstractions. These practices and concepts are not standards. Okay, a lot of times people will mistakenly think, well, this is where the standards are, right? What the kids should know. But unless you combine them with what they should do and write them into some statement that becomes a performance expectation, it's not a standard, right? Just if you look at the framework, you'll see that it says by the end of 2nd grade, okay, that students should be able to, know that a program can be created by selecting instructions and putting them in the right order, right? And they should be able to do with that, perhaps collaborate with peers, right? But neither of those is a standard. The standard became this, okay? It's working collaboratively in roles, and we identify those to construct a problem solution consisting of a sequence of programming commands. So it's putting those 2 together in something that is measurable that the student needs to perform. That becomes a standard. And that is what happened when we wrote the student standards, is we looked at the framework and what concepts and practices can be combined to create these sets of standards. And not every concept is combined with every practice. That would give you so many standards, it would be extremely overwhelming. And some of them don't necessarily make sense to combine together. But we tried to combine the ones where you're going to get the best bang for your buck at CSTA. We wrote these standards in 2017, and a lot of states have used these to create their own standards off of. And if you click on this, you're going to go to that standards page. So I'm going to click on it really quick just to show you. So if you come over here, you'll see the standards that, okay, if it comes up, that that were created. I actually like to look at as the progression chart, and if you haven't ever looked at the progression chart, it's nice to look at, because you can see this is the concept, computing systems, and then it goes into three sub-concepts, and then you can see across grade bands what students should be able to do. So you can kind of see how that progresses, right? But this is what students should be able to know and do. And from this, curriculum also gets created, right? Curriculum gets created based on those standards, and that shows you the how you'll do it, whether you're writing your own curriculum or you're using some curriculum that like code.org put out, or you know, whoever your curriculum you're using, they should be able to say how they are helping students meet these standards. I see a hand. You have a question?
Yeah, sorry, Vic. I just wanted to ask because I don't know if I heard it right. You mentioned earlier that some states actually tweak the CSTA standard itself to fit into their state, I would guess, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And so my question, yeah. My question is, so how different did they get, like from the standard itself? I'm just curious about that.
Some of them just filled in. If you look at the progression chart, you'll notice in a few cases that maybe, like in this case, grade K to 2 didn't have a standard. So
Okay.
some states just did things like, oh, where it was missing, we added something. Other states may have said, we need more in cybersecurity, so they added additional things to that. Some states took the CSTA standards just as they are and basically blessed them for their state. In the United States, each state adopts their own standards. There isn't a national standards. Every state has to adopt their own standards. Some states just adopted the CSTA standards blanket. Others went through and went, we don't want this to say continuation of this standard. We want 3rd to 5th to do something different. So they wrote a standard to go in here. Others of them may have been using specific, up in high school, some specific curriculum that they felt wasn't as well represented as they wanted it to be in level 3, so they added some additional things. Other states also looked at the ISTE standards. I don't know if you're familiar with it, right? And added in some digital literacy and digital citizenship specifically. So they became digital literacy and computer science standards. So they have extra sections that include that. So it depends on the state what they did with it. Like in California, which is where I'm from, basically it was minor tweaking. It was filling in some of the empty blanks, basically, is what it was. And then some of them were reworded slightly. And they added more examples of how you could meet those standards, even in, especially in like elementary, within courses that weren't computer courses, like how you could meet it maybe in, you know, in literacy classes or in math. So they did some of that work as well. So.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Sure. Good question. So once you have the standards, you can get curriculum that hopefully meets those standards, right? I will tell you now that it's very rare for a curriculum to meet all of the standards. Almost all the curriculum out there do a really good job with the algorithms and programming standards. And they might do okay with some of the impact standards. They don't do as well with networks or computing systems or data and analysis. A lot of curriculum concentrates on the coding side, which, you know, we get that, and we don't have unlimited time anyway, so you kind of are going to have to pick and choose a lot of times. But so that's the student standards. But what about the teacher standards? So we know what kids should be able to know and do. But we want to know, what should computer science teachers be doing in their classes? And that's why we came up with the teacher standards. And they actually existed before these came out. They've existed since 2011. But we're going to get a little bit into that history here. So we came up with 5 broad kind of groupings of these standards. Standard 1, which is about demonstrating your CS knowledge and skills, ties directly in with the student standards. Because what we say in Standard 1 is that you as a teacher should be comfortable teaching and helping your students meet all of those student standards for the grade that you teach. And as you become more advanced, as you become a teacher that's further on, okay, now I've been teaching for 10 years, what should I be able to do? I should also be really familiar with the grades below and the grades above, right? Because I got to know what they're coming in with and what I should be sending them out with, right? So, but initially you've got to focus on, can I teach like what I'm supposed to teach like now, right? I mean, that's got to be your initial focus. So that Standard 1 ties directly to the student standards. The others are standards that are things we need to do. And Standard 1 measure Standard 1 based on how comfortable you are teaching those standards, teaching your students those standards. The other standards are, how comfortable are you doing these things yourselves, right? So things like equity is one, right? And being your own professional development, designing learning experiences, and implementing those in the classroom. We're going to go into a little more detail on what these are, so don't worry. But back in ISTE and CSTA wrote the initial CS educator standards, and they used to be housed at ISTE. They were written originally in 2003 and revised in 2011. But in 2019, CSTA and ISTE got together again to revise them. And rather than having them housed at ISTE with the other ISTE standards, it was decided, because they became very different than how the ISTE standards look, it was decided they actually really belonged housed with CSTA, since we are about the computer science teachers. So that's why they're on the CSTA site, but ISTE was actually involved in this rewrite as well. And the purpose of them is to explain what CS teachers should know and be able to do as they're teaching, right? But it's aspirational. No one, especially when you're just starting out, is going to be able to meet all of these standards. You aren't, okay? But hopefully, as you become more experienced, you're able to meet more of them, and you're able to help others meet more of them, right? Because being a mentor to others can be really helpful as you get to be a more experienced CS teacher. So we expect all CS teachers to be lifelong learners. You always should be continually improving your practice, right? It isn't a one and done. It isn't, oh, okay, I taught this one, so I'm an expert now, right? And they were designed for multiple audiences, right? And multiple audiences use them now. Schools of education use them in their pre-service programs. PD providers use them to kind of make sure, are we covering what teachers need us to cover when we're doing PD for them? And state leaders here in the US use them, both as standards that they're going to measure teachers against, basically providing pathways for their teachers to improve. And administrators might use them in a school. I don't know about you, but my administrators have no idea what I do. And, they can walk into a classroom, they have no idea if it's good or not good. So part of the guidance that the standards give is what administrators should look for in a CS classroom. right? And so it gives them kind of that guidance. And then, of course, for CS teachers, as a CS teacher, I'm interested in knowing what I'm going to do. And that's kind of where we're at today. So we want to talk about that. So I'm going to actually hop over to the actual site to go through these things because it makes more sense at the actual site. So if you click on that link, I'm going to go right over here and go to the standards. So it looks very much like the slide because it is very much the slide, but there are 5 standards, 5 main standards. CS knowledge and skills. And if we do the plus on any one of them, it's going to expand them. And it shows you what the standard is. This will be the standard. Okay. And if you notice, it talks about the student standards here, and it talks about the framework that we talked about. So your content, your CS knowledge and skills is directly tied to those things, right? You should be able to apply those practices, okay, and apply knowledge of the 5 concept areas. And if I expand all the indicators, you know, you're going to see even more. Any of these things that are underlined will have definitions and or links to more things you can read. Okay, so it'll give you a little more indication. Okay, so the first one is CS knowledge and skills. And it talks about how you're going to be able to demonstrate and develop your knowledge of CS. And even if you are an experienced teacher, you might be asked to teach a new class this year, right? And so you're continually having to improve yourself. Or maybe you're, I don't know if the Philippines has any kind of extra credentialing that go along with being a CS teacher. Some of the states do here, some of them don't. But you may be required to get a certification in order to teach CS. So we're constantly having to improve our knowledge and skills. So that's what this one's about. Okay. The second one is about equity and inclusion. And this one's so vital these days because, as we all know, equity and inclusion in the CS industry is not really good. At least in the US it isn't. And we want to help improve that by helping students to understand it could be a pathway for them, right? So unless the students feel that they're included, they're not going to feel that way. But if I, as a teacher, am not good at providing an equitable and inclusive environment, then it's going to be a problem. The kids may walk away not feeling included. So we felt it needed to be its own separate, and you will see other things about equity and inclusion within some of the other standards as well. So this one is specifically about you as a teacher. It's about having you examine issues of equity in CS and understanding them yourself. It's about you purposefully examining your own bias and your own any stereotype threats and things like that, and coming up with strategies to combat those. We all have bias, right? We all do, whether we admit it or not, and we need to examine those and understand what they are. You know, it can be really easy to call on that, you know, smart kid all the time, but that's a bias, right? We have to be able to include everybody and make everybody feel like their contribution in class is welcome. We need to be able to understand how to incorporate the diverse perspectives and experiences in our classes, right? And we need to use actual data in our decision making, looking at who is enrolled in our classes, right? Here in the States, a lot of times, if you look at the demographics of a school compared to the demographics of the CS classes, way different, right? And so it's really important to realize if I'm talking about CS for all, or if I'm talking about trying to get everybody interested in CS, why don't my classes look like the school population, right? And so that's really important. So using that data from what the demographics look like versus what yours is really important. And the other thing that often gets lost in the equity discussion is accessibility for those who may need it, right? What do you do with that student who can't see? What do you do with that student who has learning differences, right? What do you do with that ESL student who doesn't understand the language, right? So providing the tools, the curriculum, and any resources you can to combat those things that could be keeping kids out of your classes or keeping kids from feeling included in your classes is really important. So that's what this one is. And there's been a lot of PD around it, and there'll continue to be a lot of PD around it. The third one I think is really important, especially I'm an elementary teacher, and elementary teachers do not identify as CS teachers. They just don't. They identify as a fifth grade teacher or a kindergarten teacher or whatever. They do not think of themselves as CS teachers. And so standard 3 can be really important. And again, even in high school, you may have been a math teacher who's now been told you have to teach CS. You're not identifying as a CS teacher. You're identifying as a math teacher who's been told they have to teach a class of CS. And so the idea here is, how can we develop one's identity and become comfortable with calling yourself a CS teacher? And it involves, of course, the indicators of pursuing the professional development, modeling continuous learning. I don't care how long you have been a teacher, you can always learn more. And there's always, especially with CS is such a new field, there's always new research coming out on the most effective ways to deliver instruction to students. And so keeping up with that is really important. Examining and counteracting your bias. Like I said, equity is going to come in a bunch of places. Committing to the mission of CS for all students, not just mouthing it, but saying, yep, every student is welcome in my class, right? Now, you may not be able to teach every student in your school because you're one person, right? But especially if you're at high school, you're probably not going to be teaching everybody in the school. But you have to be open to the fact that anyone could take your class. Leveraging community resources, and I think this one is one that's underused by a lot of people, is bringing in those community partners. Especially like high school, it's so great to do with what are the industries in the area that have CS needs. Bringing those people in and letting the people see, hey, there is a need right in your community, right? But it's even important in younger grades, right? For people to see, oh, there are career paths, and to understand that CS isn't just writing, isn't just being a games developer, because that's what they all think to begin with. I'm going to write games. And CS is so many places, bringing in those diverse community resources, diverse in any aspect, including the industry they're in. And then participating in your learning communities like this one, right? Joining your local chapter and participating in that, participating online in like the CSTA communities, things along those lines can be really helpful to helping you feel more like, okay, I can do this. I am a CS teacher. Standard 4 is about instructional design. And we often I will hear teachers go, I don't design things. I'm using code.org's curriculum and that's what I'm doing, right? But the thing is, we are designing, right? We have to look at that curriculum to see, is it meeting the needs of my students, right? Are there things in it that aren't covering all the standards that I think I should be covering, right? So unless we look at our curriculum with that critical eye, we can't do that. We may have no say in what curriculum we're using, but maybe we could supplement it, right? Bring in some community partners to get a little more of the impacts in than maybe that maybe the curriculum doesn't have, things along that line. And we have to, even if it's just looking at the lessons and the units we're teaching, we have to develop those standards aligned learning experiences and how we're going to deliver them in our class. Make sure that we're being inclusive. And if you don't understand things like UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and culturally relevant pedagogy and other techniques, it's good time to research those. And there's a lot of links in these that are great to look at if you're going, well, I've heard the term, but I don't really know what that means. You know, part of your learning is let's figure that out. And building those connections between CS and other disciplines. It's really important, especially for me in elementary grades, because I'd love to see more CS happening in the actual classrooms. I am a specials teacher, so they see me once a week, but they love to code, and I like to see it when their teachers let them show their learning, like with a Scratch project, as opposed to just creating another Google Slides presentation, right? So connecting those and connecting to the real world. Where is CS in the real world? People don't realize, it's in fashion. It's in, almost every industry you can think of has some CS in it. It just does these days. Planning projects for the students to do. Planning instructions so that we're fostering their understanding, using that data, getting that feedback, and then looking at your assessments to inform your instruction. So a lot of these are just good teaching, right? You've heard very similar things no matter what subjects you teach, right? A lot of them should apply in almost any subject area. There's a few things that are going to be a little specific and a few tweaks that you might need to make, like in UDL, or a few tweaks that certain CS specific strategies that you might want to research. But it's important that you do all of those things. And then the fifth standard is classroom practice. And this is what's happening in the classroom. So using inquiry, cultivating that positive climate, promoting student efficacy, supporting collaboration, encouraging student communication, and then guiding the feedback, right? As I get that formative assessment and I realize, ooh, I saw a lot of question marks in their eyes when I taught that. Let's reteach it, right? Those kinds of things. So those are the standards that were developed. Now, what you will find is, whoops, hang on, let me go back over here really quick. As you go through these as a teacher, how would you use these, right? And the next session you'll do will get way more in depth on this. I'm gonna just quickly touch on how you're going to use them. One of the things I like to do, and we have the roadmap now in session 3, and you can use it in session 3, but one of the things I like to do is talk about this roadmap, because we are all coming in to teaching CS from different paths, right? We might be brand new to everything. We might be an experienced teacher, but new to CS. We might be an experienced teacher by now. We might be a new teacher, but we've had industry experience, right? So, but no matter where we enter the path, we have to think about, how can I meet the standards? Well, one of the things we've done with the roadmap, and that can be really helpful for people to look at, is if you look at it, you will see that we've taken it and said, okay, if you are, for example, a new teacher and new to CS, your main concentration needs to heavily focus on standard 1. Because you have to learn the content before you can do anything else, right? And so what we've done is we've taken these standards and the indicators and said which ones might be the most important if you're a new teacher and new to CS. So there's actually 5 indicators in equity and inclusion. We're saying indicator B and E are probably the most important for a new teacher. And each of the other pathways have the same breakdown. So by the time you're an experienced teacher, we're hoping you're able to pretty much meet most of the standards. And then we're asking you to go beyond, learn more content than you need to, and mentor others in learning, right? So each of these roadmaps will tell you where your concentration should be. So I like to start thinking along those lines, because when you look at the next thing that you're going to do, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to touch on these. The next thing that you're going to do is the self-reflection checklist. And the self-reflection checklist has it's basically a spreadsheet that you fill out. And if you fill it out, I'm going to click on it. It will give you, by the way, it's going to give you this script message. Don't worry, there really is no script. We just can't get it to go away. And if you want to, you can view it. It'll show a blank script because that's all that's up there. But when you open this, it's overwhelming. Okay, so I will warn you when you get into this, which is the next step. I'm not going to go into any detail on this, but I'm going to warn you, you'll see standard 1. There's a bunch of sheets for standard 1. That's because, like we said, it is tied to the student standards. So you are deciding, can I teach this standard? Not yet. Yeah, I'm proficient at it. I'm able to teach it okay. Yeah, I'm really advanced. I could teach other people how to teach it, right? So standard 1 has a bunch of sheets, but you're not going to use all of them, right? If I teach high school, I'm going to use this one probably for sure, and maybe this one if I teach AP class, more advanced classes, right? If I teach, middle school-ish levels, then I'm going to use that. If I'm teaching elementary students, then I'm going to use maybe these 2, right? So each of these will ask that. And then the other standards each have 1 sheet with each of the indicators. And then you want to say, can I meet this standard myself? Do I know how to meet this? Okay. And you'll get into, on the next one, how to fill this in. You're going to fill in the not yet, proficient, or advanced, and then also some evidence of the proficiency. If I've said I'm proficient or advanced, how am I proficient or advanced? Maybe I link to a lesson plan I do. Maybe I link to a certificate I got from a PD, right? Some evidence. It's just narrative. And then where am I going next, right? Even if I'm advanced, where am I going next? Maybe somebody needs help and I can go show them how to do this. Or maybe I'm advanced, but I heard new research just came out on that, so I want to read it, that kind of thing. So that's the next step in this, is to fill this out yourself. I personally try and fill it out in the summer, like the beginning of the year, and then we'll revisit it during the year after I've done some PD. Like if I took a PD, I'm going to come back and look at it and go, oh, I can now move that, or I can move that and put in evidence that I more evidence that I did that, right? So then I can go back and I'll just make another copy of it. And so that I like to have the history, so I'll make copies, but you could even add columns. Like, here's my evidence at the beginning of the year, and then add 2 more columns for middle of the year and end of the year. So How you use it is up to you. But that would be the next step, is just this. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that because that's your next step. And you'll go into more detail. This is part of the second one as well, where we go into detail on exactly how to fill it out. And not yet means you need more work. Proficient means I'm comfortable with it, but I'm not an expert at it. And then I'm advanced. I feel I'm good enough to teach it to other teachers, basically, by the time you're at advanced, right? And so this is just a couple examples on how to fill it out, but I'm not going to go into detail because that's really in the next one. And then once you've done all of that, what's the purpose of it, right? The purpose is we can all improve. So where do we go for the improvement? And I know you guys are planning on saying, let's fill this out so we know what we want to focus on, right? So CSTA Philippines knows, oh, teachers need to focus here, right? So CSTA Philippines will probably be your first choice. The virtual communities are great because they're nice asynchronous. If you haven't ever seen those, do you guys know about the virtual communities? Yeah. So if you go there, you can join those, ask questions of grade level compatriots, for example, or just anybody at CSTA and get answers. It's nice when you can't get a hold of a colleague quickly. And then I want to plug the How We Teach Computing Summit sessions. That October 29th, CSTA is holding this summit. And it's all around I know Pam got the book. Pam got the Big Book of Computing Pedagogy, but you can download it for free. And all of the sessions revolve around that. So it's a great place to go for PD, the CSTA summits, and that is virtual as well. So, all right. Any questions?
You have any questions for Vicky? I see some people trickled in while Vicky was speaking. Do you have any questions for Vicky?
Let me put the link to the slides one more time for anybody who missed them.
Yeah, I have just one question. I know the answer, but let's throw it over to Victoria. One moment.
Hi, yes, good morning. My name is Victoria. I'm also Vicky, but we'll use Victoria. Okay, actually,
Well,
it's not a comment.
I'm officially Victoria as well. I just go by Vicky.
Yeah. Okay. I just have a comment because I have to express this. I appreciate very much the equity and inclusion portion of the standards. As a person okay, my background is in computing, but I progressed to education, and then I am into inclusion when I established the inclusion higher education in one of the colleges here in the Philippines. So I think it is very good that the standards are there, because when you are in a the concerns for inclusion and equity are situations that exist already, whether teachers are equipped or not. That's my experience in establishing inclusion. At the same time, then there's difficulty, and teachers probably are not aware, so they react in a manner that is not conducive to learning. So if the standards are there, it not only provides awareness, because it also has extra resources. I checked very quickly, and I think that's very, very good, because at this point, it's not just the technology or the concept part or the knowledge that's important that will help produce the learning. It's also the situation and the conditions of the students, and how they are every day. So that's very much appreciated. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I totally agree. I think because we had a discussion actually when we were originally writing them, because at that point, there had already started to be pushback on this whole thing in schools in the US. And we were like, no, we've got to explicitly call this out, because it is too important to assume people will do unless we explicitly call it out. And I love that CSTA has done, you
Mhm.
know, summits around it, and they always have a lot of sessions around it. And I really fully appreciate them myself too. So thank you.
Thank you.
And there's a Coursera course right now too on identity, diversity and inclusion that's ongoing. Yeah, that's free for CSTA Plus members. Yeah.
Right. That's a really
Well,
awesome course, actually.
yeah. Yeah, it's so much in there. Even if for the Philippines, I know that a lot of our issues might be more economic rather than racial. But you know, there's so much to learn and unpack from there. Just as Victoria said about inclusion, a lot of that.
Right.
Even the
Right.
terms that we use in computer science, you know, black hat and white hat, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. There's black hat, there's white hat, there's master and slave. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that the terminology is just, it's like,
Right.
let's not do that, right?
That's-
And even from an economic point of view, a lot of times I think it's really important to be sure if you can, to show your kids role models of kids who came, of people who came from poor economics, you know,
Mhm.
situations, who are successful in whatever field they want to go into, right?
Right.
I just think it's really important to do that so that they feel like it is a path potentially for them,
Mhm.
and it may be a way out of their economic situation.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other questions for Vicky? All right. Here's just my question. I actually know the answer to this one, but some schools would go and say, okay, we looked at the CSTA standards, and can we actually claim that our program, our curriculum is CSTA approved?
Not without going through a process.
Mhm.
There is an actual approval process where people, we have a committee of people, CSTA has a committee who will review
Mhm.
curriculum and say whether it actually aligns, and where it does align and where it doesn't align, to have an official, you know, approved. And we'll even share those curriculum on the CSTA site. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't align. And a lot of, you will see that a lot of places will say they are aligned to standards. They will not say they're fully aligned. They will not say they are approved, and they will not be featured on the CSTA site, which is one of the reasons that in Standard 4, it says to analyze your curricula, because anyone can claim, right, to meet the standards. But as you get to know them, the student standards, you can look at the curriculum and say, well, you're not really meeting that standard, right? Or, yeah, they're meeting it awesome. They're doing a great job, right? But until we're familiar with the standards ourselves, it's difficult to do that. So.
All right, thank you. I guess we're actually over time by 9 minutes already. From our 10 to 11. It was a really valuable discussion. But do we have any other questions? Maybe a last question from anybody? All right.
And feel free to email me if you have any other questions, or tweet at me if you're on Twitter. So.
And I was
Oh,
gonna advertise.
yes.
Vicky hosts the CSK 6 chat.
Oh yeah. So if you are in K to 8, so you know, the 5 to 14-year-olds, if you're teaching them, we do the CSK 8 chats twice a month on Twitter. So you're welcome to join us. I don't know, what time are they in your time though, Edge?
So typically
Morning.
it's in the morning. It's
Yeah.
mid-morning, early morning to mid-morning. So
Right.
that's
You
the
do
start of
them
my
at
day. So sometimes I just get to read, because while I'm administering a laboratory exercise, I'd be able to see the tweets come up on my phone. But I do sometimes get to participate. When the school year started, August, I have been like just lurking around and just reading.
Yeah, and you can always read, and on Wakelet, we do have archives of all of the discussions. So you can always read them after the fact.
That's fantastic. What time is it, Vicky? On Thursdays, did you say?
It's on Wednesdays, the first and third Wednesdays.
Mhm.
It's at 5 p.m. Pacific time.
Oh,
So
that's
it would be what, 8 a.m. your time on Thursday, right?
8 a.m.
It's a school day. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. 8 a.m. on a school day is
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
but
is
it's
why,
good to know.
yeah, it's hard to hold them on Saturdays though. We, you know, there's never a perfect time for
No.
for them. So, but feel free, check out the archives
Mhm.
and, you know, check out the hashtag. It's CSK8 and
Mhm.
you can see, in fact, we just had a discussion this week, so you can see this week's discussion. And we are finishing up our study of the Big Book of Computing Pedagogy,
Yes.
the first Wednesdays of October, November, and December. So we've been doing it all year. So we're up to chapter 10.
Wow. I was gonna say I shared that free download link in our Facebook group. It's yeah. I'll rehash it. I don't know, resurface that so that everybody can
Yeah.
get a copy. It's an awesome
Yeah,
book.
it's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's awesome that even if you only have as a PDF. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've used it as a PDF all year until I got my
Yeah,
actual
that's-
copy at the conference.
I was looking forward to getting my copy at the conference, but things happened.
They said
I know
Anyway,
I
so
was
go
sad
ahead,
not
you
to
were saying.
meet you, Edge.
If you are viewing us remotely, this is our feedback form for this. If you are going to request for a certificate for being with us today, please put in the name that you want on the certificate, and it will be sending out to the email that you register at this feedback form. So this is our feedback form for today. This also will help you if you are viewing this after the fact or after the conference, after the chapter meeting today. I know that we have some restrictions about viewing and joining events now, but if you are able to view this after at your own leisure or at your own time, then you can also please give feedback to our session through this link. Also, some announcements is that the executive board for CSTA Philippines is open. We're going to be having our elections in December this year. There will be 5 open positions, and the officers of this chapter are going to be selected from the executive board and will serve for 2 years on the board and as officers if you are selected as an officer. So more on that soon, but if you are interested, then you can contact us at philippines@csteachers.org. Also, information in the bulletin that will be coming up next week. Right, and then we will have a hybrid chapter meeting. I made the slides before I got the news. So we will determine when this will be in November. If it will be in November, we'll try to schedule it in November 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly, because those were the dates allowed by the Department of Education for us. So we'll try to move things around, but we will have a hybrid chapter meeting soon. So those who cannot join us in person can join us remotely, but otherwise we will have professional development sessions and networking in person. We will look for a venue central to Manila. Do we have anything else from Pam or from Jonathan?
I'm good. I think we covered everything.
All right,
Yeah.
so thank you very much for people
Thank you
who
for-
have joined here. If you have not yet joined, you can be a member at csteachers.org and then join the chapter, the Philippine chapter at philippines.csteachers.org. For people viewing this with a recording, feel free to share the recording to other persons in your school. Remember, you don't have to be teaching computer science, as we call it in the Philippines. We have a computer class for some schools. You don't have to be a computer science teacher or computer education teacher to join CSTA. if you practice computational thinking or practices in your classroom, go ahead and join us at CSTA Philippines. And we're all in this together. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this evening for Vicky and Pam. Thank you very much. So we'll
Thank
end
you,
the recording
Vicky.
there. And
Yeah, Vicky, thank you very much.
are way over time at the moment.
You're welcome. And sorry we went over.
No worries. Thank you. Hi, Harris. Thanks for coming. Jobert and Joel, Raquel.
Hey
Yes.
guys, gotta
Thank
run.
you.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Thank you po, Miss
Bye
Pam.
bye. Great
Bye.
meeting. Great meeting, guys.
Yes, agree. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.